So, the question I ask is, what is utopia? We all want a better world. And if we look to the early 1900s, there was a whole, 4 decades of utopian novels that had proliferated in the UK and in North America. Then in about the 1930s, the dystopian novels began to be published. In fact, my good buddy John Gormley called this a dystopian novel, and I never argued with him because I didn't have time, and it would have been a good argument. However, the dystopian novels, they display a world that's malfunctioned, a world that's distressed, a world that's no longer delicate and gentle, no longer benevolent and loving and kind, a world that's riddled with all manner of incongruency to the human condition and what we really want as humans. And the dystopian novels, we see them today. We see the fruit of them today. Can anybody name a dystopian movie they may have seen in the last year? Hungry. Well, there was one within the last year. In fact, one of the theme songs that I was rolling here at the outset was from The Hunger Games by Lorde. And it was a remake of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. So that's the product of this dystopian era and genre of literature, is things like The Hunger Games, things like The Blade Runner, things like Waterworld with Kevin Costner. Whose favorite is Waterworld with Kevin Costner? Nobody. So, some years ago, I began playing a game with my kids and started spitballing with coworkers and colleagues and friends about things I would do if I were king of the world and asking them what they would do if they were king of the world. And the ideas continued to percolate. With those in mind, I considered, you know what? I believe the world could be a better place. I believe someone has to write about it and tell what could it be in a time yet unseen where there's one individual who actually is imbued with power to change anything, to do anything, to lift up the human condition by liberating mankind with laws that actually support all that you and I have longed for. Laws about taxation, laws about corruption, abuse, laws about deception, laws that most people standing around the water cooler and sitting around the coffee table say, well, I would change that if I could. So a utopia, what is it? It's a better world, and it's your world. It's my world, it's our world. But a utopia always begins with you. And in utopia, what's occurred is that the World Congress is the world government. And to no one's surprise, the world government is one world government. In the period utopia speaks about, the world has one language, the world has one currency. And this world government recognizes that the human condition has not been changed by the democratic process of all the ages, the thousands of years of democracy, and nothing has changed in the human condition. They sense and feel and hear from the citizens of the globe that this apathy is pervasive, and it's a cancer on the human condition that prevents us from moving forward as individuals and as a collective to make our world a better place. So in this World Congress gathering, and I'm going to give you a brief synopsis before I read a couple passages, then we'll take questions. In the World Congress, they determined that apathy has gone unabated, and now it's time to fix it. So what should we do? They float the idea of working and nuancing their democracy again, but somebody then puts out the idea of appointing a king or queen, one ruler. And the argument's made that we can, as humans, hope to find that ruler who truly is benevolent and truly wants the greatest good for all mankind and truly uses reason to bring out laws, edicts, decisions that are determinant in making a better world for people. And that's why utopia begins with you, because it could be you or you or you or you that would be this world ruler and reasonably say to yourself, I'm going to rule the world and make only good decisions. Would that be possible? How corrupt might you get if you were king or queen of the world? Is there anybody in the room that would stand up and say, I would be incorruptible as a world ruler? Not. So we deal with that a bit in Utopia and how much corruption does creep in or how much doesn't creep in. Why corruption may or may not be present in a true world ruler who is given the power over everything. The resources are all at the king's behest and fingertips to make the changes that are necessary in that king's view. In fact, every one of us wants a utopia. At my work at the fire hall, I'd love to have things run my way. That would make it a utopia. A kindergarten teacher in a classroom wants the kids to all follow the stream, the direction, the path that that kindergarten teacher puts out. That's a utopia in that classroom, if the teacher could have it. The mayor of Saskatoon, Don Atchison, I was told he's going to show up tonight, but he missed it, obviously, because of the snowstorm that was impending. They couldn't clear the priority 1 streets fast enough for him to get here. Every mayor and every council member across the globe would love to be the one that makes the decisions. They do so collectively now in our democracy. And democracy is in some ways buoying up culture, and in some ways it's letting us down. So we all want a utopia. Now, with your permission, what a liar, without your permission, I'm going to read a couple passages. How much time would you like me to commit to reading? 5 minutes, okay. So, there's an example there. If you were king or queen of the world, you could determine how much reading time is given to the person launching his or her book at McNally. It may be 7 minutes by the time I'm done, Rich. Thanks, Dad. So we jump into the story after the main character of the story, named Saul, actually witnesses the newscast of a school shooting where 12 children and 3 teachers are murdered at the hands of 2 shooters in a school. Saul's watching it on the way home on the magnetic rail transit system from work, where he works at a university in Seattle. Begins with the newscaster speaking. What we do know, Grady, the seasoned reporter stated, is that there are reports of up to 12 students who have been killed by 2 homegrown terrorists. Several teachers have been shot, and the school is nowhere near returning to the homey elementary school it was just hours ago. It's now forced to walk through the nightmare of utter pandemonium that ended only minutes ago. As you can see behind me, students are being escorted out of the school with the task unit members flanking both sides. The reporter took a breath, glanced at the school, and offered more. There's no clear indication as to how and why this happened. We are all anticipating officials will find some answers as they interview the man they've just taken into custody. The DBN reporter turned slightly to direct her viewers' attention over her shoulder. Saul could clearly see in the background that the remaining shooter was in police custody. As the eager reporter returned her face to the camera, Saul was fixated on the background. What he saw next was probably the most disturbing and yet most exhilarating thing he could imagine. As the alleged killer was being ushered between police cruisers to the armored detainment van, a business-attired man came into view. He looked to be a plainclothes detective, his ID tag dangling from his neck. The entire situation had been de-escalated. No one was scrambling or wielding a weapon at the moment. The scene had become relatively calm, and although there was certainly an attitude of haste to secure the alleged killer, something didn't sit right for Saul. Staring on at the macabre scene, it seemed there was a sickening routine that had developed. The shooting was over. Kids and parents were being reunited in their cars and off to the side of the school at the critical incident management area. You would think a situation like this would incite more fervency, but it was in the placid way things were taking place in the background that gave the appearance of this event being all too common. Just a routine school shooting. Or at least that's how it seemed. What the hell is the matter with this place? Saul petitioned himself in response to the blasé management of the school shooting environment. Crazy guy shoots up a school, crazy guy kills innocent children, crazy guy is cornered by police. Well, crazy guy's handcuffed and taken away into police custody. It feels so scripted, Saul thought. But it was no script. The casual process after the incident had become commonplace. The scenes were all too normalized for anyone to get overly excited about, at least anyone witnessing from behind their personal media screen. The pictures on the screen were so innocuous at this point, but it was beginning to twist Saul up in his gut. No question about it. It was a total routine on every level, as if it had been rehearsed hundreds of times. Everyone on scene is so apathetic, Saul noted. Media, police, even the would-be victims seem unfazed by the events. For Christ's sake, Saul lamented, it's only been a few minutes since the killers were blasting away at innocent children. How can everyone be so calm? Even in the presence of shock, Saul was confused by the rote sense of duty he saw from the players on scene. Saul was now spellbound by what was playing out. The police officer, with the alleged killer in hand, was briefly stopped by another detective to exchange some info, standing casually at the open door of the mobile detainment unit. Neither of them was in a hurry to load this newest killer. The exchange took all of 4 seconds, but that was all that was needed. In those seconds, Saul's brief concern slammed into reality. He was magnetized to the screen. Staring intently, Saul saw the handgun swing up from the sport-coated man who was up close to the officers now. In less time than it took to blink, there was one more victim to add to the day's death toll. The freshest of killers became the freshest kill. 2 shots penetrated the audio feed and penetrated the Brookmore Elementary School murderer's head. Over the reporter's shoulder, Saul saw the school shooter begin tilting his head down to step into the safety of the mobile detainment unit. And the next second, pop, pop, he crumpled to the ground. The sport-coated shooter dropped his weapon immediately and just stood there. With his hands now in the air, three officers leapt on him, and the DBN cameraman wheeled the shot away from the reporter and zoomed in on the fracas. Was this for real? Did that just happen? Saul yelled in silence, but Saul knew the answer to his own question. With an unbroken gaze, Saul stared even more intently, as if he thought he would see something that wasn't there. Leaning forward, eyes subtly squinting and his mouth gaping just a little, Saul took in every frame of the live but surreal coverage. The shot widened again, and on the screen the DBN reporter was crouched down on the ground in the foreground of the shot. Her awkward take-cover stance strained her to keep from fumbling and falling to the curb. This is why people love watching live streams, Saul thought. You never know what the hell might happen. The camera was still shaking, with the background plainly in view. Saul wasn't sure if what he said was in his head or if he spoke it out loud, but he knew that millions of others would have felt the same way about watching a school shooter get taken out live on the digital broadcast network. Good, he said to himself. I guess we won't have to waste tax dollars on dragging that son of a bitch through the courts. Way to go, buddy. In his crescendoed anger and passion for justice, Saul silently praised the sport-coated vigilante. I wish it was me who blew that asshole away, he thought. The images in the Brookmore stream broke away, and DBN anchor Grady Jorgensen filled the screen. Looking at the anchor desk of the DBN Broadcast Center, a part of Saul that had a need for justice took hold of him. Saul couldn't help but think, if it were up to me, I would have every one of those selfish bastards killed. Who says rehabilitation is more important than justice? This place would be different if I were running things. I'll stop there. Time? That said, I'm deeply moved by my own writing. So if you've not seen where this seems to be going, we find an individual greatly disturbed at what he sees in society and culture, and no different than many individuals today. The world government, in fact, recognizes the same disturbing nature of society and culture. So Utopia takes us on a journey of when those two meet, the world government and the one individual who will rule benevolently and doing the greatest good for the greatest number. So if there are any questions or comments, I'd love you to throw out there, and happy to talk about any of the other edicts that we've put in here if you have questions about that. I say we as if there were a writing team. Well, in fact, there was a writing team. Sorry, I like to talk, so I won't stop yet. The writing team was many of you that influenced my thinking and the direction of travel for some of these laws and edicts that I've placed in Utopia. And just those discussions, those conversations that Chris read about that I like to have were really life-giving for putting together a book such as Utopia. Any thoughts or questions from the audience? Open mic time.
In history, have there been successful things that you maybe based Saul on?
Yeah, an excellent question, and we find there's a bit of a debate in the World Congress over the potential for a sovereign to do more harm than good. But history shows there was one with Suleiman the Great. I believe he was from the Persian Empire. I'm sorry, I forget where he came from. I had some actual historical kings in there that were known to be benevolent, kind, and not the dictatorial monsters that so many monarchies and sovereignties end up being. So they did exist, in fact. But why didn't those kings, Suleiman the Great, for instance, why didn't he end up expanding his empire and becoming this great world leader, and we would have his successor today leading our world? I think the answer is because there were other kings and monarchies and rulers in other countries that were there to stop him.
From your other books, you obviously have biblical knowledge. Is the fact that the biblical scenario develops that there will be a ruler have any effect on your...
Well, due to the nature of my other books and the likelihood they may offend some, I won't speak of them. No, you know what? Part of my historical understanding of biblical things does play in very subtly that there's always been the thinking that there could be at one point in the future the great Imam. And in fact, I speak of what's called the eighth son prophecy, where the ancient Cherokee tribe, they've long recognized that there's 8 seasons of time, and at one point in time the world will be prepared to receive their one ruler. And they launch a spontaneous tribute to the king when he's inaugurated as king in front of the world, because the time is right. So the address goes on to indicate how time is the master, not unlike a mother who's ready to give birth to a child. Time can't be overcome when that baby is ready to be born. It must come when it's ready.
How do you feel about the saying absolute power corrupts absolutely?
Well, that was a misstatement that was taken from Lord Acton's discussion about power. In fact, the World Congress addresses that because it comes out. So absolute power corrupts the corruptible. The dialogue kind of follows that if the desire is not there, if you are that monarch in that other region or that government in that other region, and I want your oil, and I'm the United States government, I start a war to get into your region and take your oil. That's one thinking. But if I don't exist and you are the only one that exists in the entire world and you own everything, you actually have everything under your authority, desire is diminished. You need for nothing or want for nothing because it's all yours anyway, which is really an insulator against corruption. Let me pause your questioning, and I'm going to read one more shorter passage. I don't think my 7 minutes was completely consumed. Here, let's do this one. As he scrolled through the news feeds, he flipped right past the top story about the Brookmore shooting, and his mind started to wander. When he saw the day's other stories, it was clear none of it was helping where his head was at. The news feeds read, off-duty cop on charges of domestic abuse. Healthcare district refuses to treat immigrant with no health care. Home invasion in suburbs leaves elderly occupant frightened. Invader not yet found. Transgender rape and beating case enters 4th day of trial. Cambodian village raided by guerrilla forces. Hundreds of women and children raped and killed. Priest convicted of pedophilia, defrocked. Carjacking leaves male hostage with concussion. Sitting at the table now, Saul let his thoughts disconnect him from the moment after seeing the daily news feeds. He was buried in his own thoughts. There were so few times he could recall feeling the satisfaction he felt from seeing a killer shot. Maybe it wasn't satisfaction so much, but more like a moment of profound relief. Being there, right in the moment, watching justice take place, the moment a killer was shut off by a curbside justice shooter. Saul was no bloodthirsty miscreant himself, yet the fact was that seeing a brutal, merciless killer, wide-eyed with fear for only a second as he saw the trigger squeezed on a gun pointed at his head, felt right. The whole event left Saul filled with feelings he could not yet unravel. Saul was no one special. He was in his early 50s, married with 2 grown children. He loved his work in a university library and looked forward to regular coffee dates with friends, and exactly like everyone else, Saul was subject to seeing the media screen broadcasts at every turn. Sometimes he wondered if that had desensitized him. The cumulative flood of unpalatable events had lodged themselves in the memory of far too many citizens, if not all. And this latest event was not rolling off the back of this duck. Justice, Saul pensively said under his breath. That's all it was. It was a longing for justice. Saul was ready, more ready than he had ever been for justice. No applause for that passage. It was too short. So I give you that in this read, and
I have to put a disclaimer on that to say that the similarity between names and events is purely coincidental.
No, I didn't. That's not a bad idea. I was thinking the other day that I could just go into the file and change the title and republish it tomorrow. If anybody's interested in publishing a book ever, the Amazon platform CreateSpace is what I use, and it's fantastic. But Utopia, what if Donald Trump were king of the world? Utopia, what if Bernie Sanders were king of the world? It's about 4 mouse clicks, and I could have the name changed in there by tomorrow. But those guys want to be king of the world. So if that's all you have, no questions, no thoughts or comments. Oh,
Jim, how long was your process to write the book?
I thought, Curtis, it was going to be 3 to 6 months because it was just spilling out of my head every time we visited, every time I visited with family. And I sat down and, in fact, Mr. Dal Tiffin, an acquaintance from the recent past, showed up tonight. And when we talked about it almost a year and a half ago, I was about done then. And it ended up being over 2 years to get that off. All right, so thank you very much for coming. Please stay and chat, and please pick up a copy of Utopia. I'd love to hear your thoughts after you've read through it or along the way. Thank you for being here.
Hey guys, I'd like to thank Jim for choosing McNally Robinson as a place to come and launch his book for us. It was wonderful, and those of you who are going to be reading it, I know all of you will be, let's all give Jim a round of applause as a precursor to that.
Thank you.
And stick around and have a nice chat and get a book.